Hello there, and welcome to the channel. Well, it's Wednesday, and so that means I'm going to recite or read. Usually I have a slideshow, but this time I'm reading a more extended passage, and so I'm just going to read it. This is an excerpt from Truman Capote's amazing short story, Children on Their Birthdays. I'm going to be using an accent because I'm a very theatrical person. All the children on the porch had grown so still that when a cone of wasps started humming, the girls did not set up their usual holler. Their attention was too fixed upon the approach of Miss Bobbit and her mother, who had by now reached the gate. "Begging your pardon," called Miss Bobbit in a voice that was at once silky and childlike, like a pretty piece of ribbon, and immaculately exact, like a movie star or a schoolmarm. "But might we speak to the grown-up persons of the house?" This, of course, meant Aunt El, and at least to some degree myself, but Billy Bob and all the other boys, no one of whom was over 13, followed down to the gate after us. From their faces, you would have thought they'd never seen a girl before, certainly not like Miss Bobbit. As Aunt El said, whoever heard tell of a child wearing makeup? Tangi gave her lips an orange glow. Her hair, rather like a costume wig, was a mass of rosy curls, and her eyes had a knowing pencil tilt. Even so, she had a skinny dignity. She was a lady, and, what is more, she looked you in the eye with manlike directness. "I'm Miss Lily Jane Bobbit, Miss Bobbit from Memphis, Tennessee," she said solemnly. The boys looked down at their toes, and on the porch Cora McCall, who Billy Bob was courting at the time, led the girls into a fanfare of giggles. "Country children," said Miss Bobbit with an understanding smile, and gave her parasol a saucy whirl. "My mother," and this homely woman allowed an abrupt nod to acknowledge herself, "my mother and I have taken rooms here. Would you be so kind as to point out the house? It belongs to Mrs. Sawyer." "Why, sure," said Aunt El. "That's Mrs. Sawyer's, right there across the street. The only boarding house around here. It is an old, tall, dark place with about 24 lightning rods scattered on the roof. Mrs. Sawyer is scared to death of a thunderstorm." Coloring like an apple, Billy Bob said, "Please, ma'am, it being such a hot day and all, wouldn't they rest a spell and have some tutti frutti?" And Aunt El said, "Yes, by all means," but Miss Bobbit shook her head. "Very fattening, tutti frutti, but merci you kindly." And they started across the road, the mother half dragging her parcels in the dust. Then, and with an earnest expression, Miss Bobbit turned back. The sunflower yellow of her eyes darkened, and she rolled them slightly sideways as if trying to remember a poem. "My mother has a disorder of the tongue, so it is necessary that I speak for her," she announced rapidly, and heaved a sigh. "My mother is a very fine seamstress. She has made dresses for the society of many cities and towns, including Memphis and Tallahassee. No doubt you have noticed and admired the dress I am wearing. Every stitch of it was hand-sewn by my mother. My mother can copy any pattern, and just recently she won a $25 prize from the Ladies' Home Journal. My mother can crochet, knit, and embroider. If you want any kind of sewing done, please come to my mother. Please advise your friends and family. Thank you." And then, with a rustle and a swish, she was gone. Cora McCall and the girls pulled their hair ribbons nervously, suspiciously, and looked very put out and prune-faced. "I'm Miss Bobbit," said Cora, twisting her face into an evil imitation. "And I'm Princess Elizabeth. That's who I am. Ha ha ha!" "Furthermore," said Cora, "that dress was just as tacky as could be." "Personally," Cora said, All my clothes come from Atlanta, plus a pair of shoes from New York, which is not even to mention my silver turquoise ring all the way from Mexico City, Mexico. Aunt Elle said they ought not to behave that way about a fellow child, a stranger in the town, but the girls went on like a huddle of witches, and certain boys, the sillier ones that liked to be with the girls, joined in and said things that made Aunt Elle go red and declare she was going to send them all home and tell their daddies to boot. But before she could carry forward this threat, Miss Bobbitt herself intervened by traipsing across the Sawyer porch, costumed in a new and startling manner. The older boys, like Billy Bob and Preacher Star, who had sat quiet while the girls razzed Miss Bobbitt, and who had watched the house into which she disappeared with misty, ambitious faces, they now straightened up and ambled down to the gate. Cora McCall sniffed and poked out her lower lip, but the rest of us went and sat on the steps. Miss Bobbitt paid us no mind whatever. The Sawyer yard is dark with mulberry trees, and it is planted with grass and sweet shrub. Sometimes, after a rain, you can smell the sweet shrub all the way into our house. And in the center of this yard there is a sundial which Mrs. Sawyer installed in 1912 as a memorial to her Boston bull, Sonny, who died after having lapped up a bucket of paint. Miss Bobbitt pranced into the yard toting the Victrola, which she put on the sundial. She wound it up and started a record playing, and it played The Count of Luxembourg. By now it was almost nightfall, a firefly hour, blue as milk glass, and birds like arrows swooped together and swept into the folds of trees. Before storms, leaves and flowers appear to burn with a private light color, and Miss Bobbitt got up in a little white skirt like a powder puff, and with strips of gold glittering tinsel ribboning her hair, seemed set against that darkening all around to contain this illuminated quality. She held her arms arched over her head, her hands lily limp, and stood straight up on the tips of her toes. She stood that way for a good long while, and Aunt Elle said it was right smart of her. Then she began to waltz around and around and around and around she went until Aunt Elle said why she was plain dizzy from the sight. She stopped only when it was time to rewind the Victrola, and when the moon came rolling down the ridge, and the last supper bell had sounded, and all the children had gone home, and the night iris was beginning to bloom, Miss Bobbitt was still there in the dark, turning like a top.